Hello, hello, hello. Hey guys, how you doing today? This is John Rodriguez, aka invAAsive on PokerStars, playing another one of Ugly Tuna's internet challenges. Today is Thursday, January. I have no idea what today's date is, but basically, this is the third day in a row that we have played poker. I am not really good at playing poker all these days in a row. It's kind of not my style. I think the last time that I played 3 days in a row, the third tournament that I played, I was just kind of super tired and didn't really care too much. But today, I remembered that and sort of managed my energy. I was up pretty early for work, and then I got a chance to take a little 20-minute siesta. So now I'm feeling kind of refreshed. It is roughly 9:30. This tournament started right around 8 o'clock at night, and I believe the tournament started with over 20 players. Yeah, it looks like the tournament started with 23 players. Currently, we are in 4th place. We have a couple of the chip leaders sitting at our table. Is top 2 at our table? Yeah, top 2 and Tomb Raiders are sitting at the table. So this is going to be one tough 17-player left tournament. Basically, what's going on here is we are playing at 6120 with a 20-chip ante, or is it 15-chip ante? I actually, yeah, 20-chip ante, and the blinds are still relatively small, all things considered. We do have an above-average stack. I believe the average stack is right here, 6,700. Our chip stack has been sort of up and down. We flopped a really, really good hand early on in this tournament against a player who's no longer playing. I don't bluff 111, who was sitting right where JRC 30,000. JRC 30,000. That's a big number, JRC. JRC 30,000 is taking the place of Jason I don't bluff, who actually ran an elaborate bluff against me when I had flopped a straight. So I was able to run my chips up to about a double stack, and then through a few different hands in a row, I ended up bringing my stack back down into the 4,000 chip range and was able to sort of claw and chip my way up. I did have pocket aces in one hand where I overshoved a $2,200 pot, and I had about 4,000 left, so I was able to just scoop a pot on the flop there. So that put me right around average, and I've been sort of chipping up here and there. As it turns out, I mean, if you've been watching the videos or if you're part of the crew that plays, this is a very familiar table to you. You kind of know a lot of these players. Chris DiCarlo is one of the players that I know that you definitely know that we have notes on as a straightforward player. Tomb Raiders is a guy named Tommy who I actually had him in my video, I think just once, where he had overplayed pocket queens against Bill's quad threes, and Bill is here. I'm sure he remembers that hand very nicely. We have SEN87 here, Sherry. I guess she is sitting with not as many chips as she would like to, but I was able to win a pretty decent pot size off of her, where she made a very correct laydown. Sherry, if you're watching this, you made a very good laydown on the river. I think it was a 9 of hearts river, and I rivered a very nice flush. So, you know, we have been getting a little lucky, a little unlucky, but basically we're in a spot where we have started to record this tournament with 17 players left, just because I wanted to not record the earlier parts of the tournament, really because the blinds don't really do a whole lot, so a lot of my decisions were just not interesting. I mean, I stayed out of a few pots that I probably should have gotten into, and I got into a few pots that I should have probably gotten out of. But we do have a pretty good action table here. Top 2 has been giving a lot of action. Tomb Raiders 4, actually either he's been having some good cards or he's been giving a lot of action as well. Tony is, well, I guess he's not giving too much action. But definitely not a lot of people who are limping, not a lot of people who are check calling. So there is some people who are willing to play some poker here, thank God. The last couple of tournaments that we've been in have been limp callers and people who just check all the time. It's very difficult to win big pots and put people on hands when they refuse to put any amount of money into the pot. Just move it over to the chat. Actually, I was just saying the same thing. Bill is asking a very good question here. He's saying, can someone please explain to me the purpose of opening up with a pre-flop min raise? I would like opinions. Bill, if you have watched any of my videos, I will tell you that it is one of the most annoying and least productive bets that you can make. I think for a long time, I think from 2011 to 2013, there was a movement where players were trying to invite re-raises with their good hands, and they were also to really maximize the efficiency of their bets. So, I think players were starting to notice that whether or not they had raised this pot to 300 or raised this pot to 240, that it really didn't affect whether or not they were going to get a caller that much. So there was a movement where it was thought for a long time that just min raising or raising, I guess raising the minimum is the most efficient way to get people to possibly fold their big blinds. But I think now with people defending their big blinds a lot more wide than they used to, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, people were just making a lot of mistakes in the big blind and folding their big blind to these min raises. I think now you're going to see a lot of people defending with pretty much any two cards when their big blind gets min raised, especially when we're playing with stacks as deep as we are. For example, this raise very rarely works against top two with his stack the way it is. Of course, as I say that, top two decides that his cards are not good enough. So maybe Tommy has very timely put that theory to the test and crushed my dreams. But I will say that I do agree with Bill's question. Well, I guess you can't agree with the question, but I think I've asked that question a lot where, I even ask myself, like, if I min raise in this spot, really what am I accomplishing versus maybe making a 3x bet or a 4x bet? And I think there's some really cool stories that you can tell with min raises when the blinds are a little bit, like when you have a little bit less big blinds. I think when you have this many big blinds, players are sitting with 11,000 chips, 15,000 chips, I have 9,000 chips. When you make your min raises, people in position are very likely to be calling you with hands like Queen 10 of diamonds, King Jack offsuit, even 5-6s, 6-7s that are suited. They're able to see cheap flops in position with the, well, I guess maybe the erroneous impression that you are min raising with a pretty solid hand, especially players who tend to play very tightly. When they do end up min raising, it definitely looks a lot stronger. But I think I have adopted a style, at least early on in a tournament, where I'm basically never min raising, and I think it's because I need my pre-flop raises to tell me at least a little bit about the type of hands my opponents are going to be calling me down with. So if I'm in a situation where I'm min raising and I get a call behind or even two callers behind, I have almost no more information about their hands than I did otherwise. In fact, it's very likely that if I had made a bigger raise, I would be getting hands like 5-8 suited to fold. But since I didn't and I just make a min raise, the players in position are thinking that they're going to be able to look me up with some very speculative cards, I guess. So, I don't mind these raises, especially if you're going to be doing this exact same thing with aces and you're also doing this exact same thing with Jack 9 suited. I don't mind it, but it is not a safe bet by any means, and you obviously have no idea what your opponents are calling you down with. For example, I think if this player makes it, 400 or 450, I think I'm always folding Queen 10, but I think, he's done a good job of inviting Queen 10 into this hand. So when we flop basically nothing here, I think I'm just going to check under the impression that my opponent is going to be making a continuation bet. When my opponent doesn't make a continuation bet, I really don't know what to make of it, because he should be making a continuation bet there all the time. So I look at his notes and it says bet sizing is good, but calling pre-flop raises with 7-8 off, and likes to call me with anything. So I feel like I'm being trapped in this spot with maybe a pretty good hand, or I think maybe he has some showdown value with ace-king. So when this player, when I see the king here, I'm obviously in a spot where I could be betting, but I just don't think my opponent, based on this note, likes to call me with anything, is going to be looking to fold. Even if I am up against an ace high. I just don't think my opponent is going to be willing to fold, but I am putting my opponent on something very nice like either king queen or specifically ace king. Even though my opponent has checked back twice to me, I just am putting him on a stronger holdings. I think that me putting him on stronger holdings comes from the position in which he raised. I think he's essentially raising for middle position in an eight player table. So either my opponent has maybe a small pocket pair like pocket sevens or eights, or my opponent has at least ace high or a hand that definitely has me beat. So I was able to call this min raise, and my opponent not making bets, it allowed me to sort of look for cards for very cheaply. So I was able to see a flop, turn, and river without putting any extra chips in the middle. So not for nothing, anytime you get that sort of sale price, like I guess you could say when you go shopping you look for a sale. So I think when people are min betting, it's basically like Kohl's putting everything on a half off sale. And even though you might not want to shop at Kohl's, it's kind of like, well, everything's half off, I might as well go. So I'm kind of in that boat when I have hands like Queen 10 and Jack 9 and Jack 8 and Queen 7 suited and Ace 10 offsuit. These are hands that I normally wouldn't feel comfortable playing for a raise, but the min raise sort of invites those hands in. And there are players that can get themselves in a whole lot of trouble by flopping top pair, and when Tony is showing up here with a really good hand like kings or queens, he's going to get those players sucked into a pot where maybe they didn't want to play. Like, there was a pot that I played in one of my videos where I think I got sucked into a pot with like a queen 3, and I think I flopped top pair. Ended up calling a bet when I probably knew I was behind, but I still couldn't get away from the hand right away, because when you do flop top pair and you are heads up, it's very difficult to just fold to one single bet. But so Bill says, okay, nice talk. I guess he's upset that nobody else is responding to his question about the small blind and I'm sorry, the min raising. But you can absolutely, Bill, if you want, I would love to talk with this specifically with you, Bill, because I feel like you're the type of player who would absolutely want to talk poker. Not all the time. I don't think it's something that you really live for, but I do think that there's times where I've seen your reaction to hands, and I can tell that you actually care. Not necessarily about just like trying to, crush souls and stack people's chip stacks, but you actually care about the way the game is played. So I would love to, just kind of shoot the shit with you and say, hey, look, let's talk about, what are we really accomplishing by min raising versus, Bill's sort of standard raise, at least that I've seen, has been a 2.5x raise. I don't know if that's something that he has already programmed into his PokerStars account. I think that's something that I said that you can do in an earlier video. I said, you can pre-program your PokerStars account to have one of your buttons on your slider down here in the bottom right-hand side to say, automatically bet 2.5 big blinds or 4.5 big blinds. So the pattern that I'm noticing from Bill is that it's always a calculated 2.5x big blind raise when he is opening a pot that hasn't been raised yet. So looks like we have a pretty large bet here from top two. Kind of a scary board. The deuce doesn't really change a whole lot. This, I don't know what to make of a huge bet like this when the deuce comes off. But, he has put sufficient pressure on his opponents, and he has a chip stack to do that. So, you kind of have to put your opponent on an overpair in that spot. Although I didn't know if he raised preflop. I would assume that if he has an overpair, he's absolutely raising preflop. But let's just go see what sort of hands our opponent's doing this with. So, we take a look at this, and very early position, top two makes a... Okay, so this raise from Inner Tony, I've expressed that the min raise under the gun is a very strong raise, and there's a lot of different reasons why I feel that way, but I think the biggest reason is I think players mostly, when they get pocket aces or kings, are looking to raise, but also looking to raise enough where they know they're going to get at least one caller, and the minimum that you can raise obviously is 2 times what this bet is. So, this raise, I don't want to say is very often aces or kings, but 10s are better. And ace kings, I think you're going to see make this raise. A lot of pocket pairs, even like, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s will make this raise. I just very rarely think that this raise right here is like king jack offsuit. So when top two decides that he's going to make a a min 4-bet. Well, I guess I don't know if you can call it a 4-bet. Basically, when top 2 decides that he's going to be making this bet, this is just ultra strong. It's almost too strong. I mean, it's kind of like it's just begging for Inner Tony to. It's either inducing Inner Tony to be making re-raises, or at the very least making sure that he gets at least one caller. So when you see this bet, guys, you know, unless you have reason to believe that your opponent is just a complete spaz out, or you know, just misclicks a lot, this bet right here is I'd say, you know, top 4 scary bets in online poker. So we get Bill to call here, and I think by design, you know, you're sort of saying that you have a really big hand. So if I'm Bill and I have a hand like 5-6 of clubs, and I see this bet, I think like a 5-6 of clubs or a 7-8 of diamonds is the perfect type of hand to be calling this bet specifically, because I don't think Bill thinks his hand is really good right now, but I think in position on a hand that is basically, like, it's almost like you're turning your cards face up and explaining to your opponents that you have aces or kings when you make this bet. So if you're a poker player and you're able to understand that poker players behind you are going to recognize this as aces or kings, I think you should probably be putting this in your bag of tricks to use in other spots. But seeing as how top 2 is 100% out of position on whoever's going to be calling him, it's just a really negative EV bluff bet. So if you're ever bluffing, if you ever have Jack 10 offsuit in this spot, you're just going to get destroyed in the long run. You know, unless you are willing to just follow through with 2 or 3 barrels. So Bill, you know, understanding that Bill might understand that this bet kind of turns his cards face up, I put Bill on a hand like, you know, either Jack 9 of clubs, or, you know, some sort of suited connector that flops really well or has the potential to flop really well. Plus Bill is in position on his opponent who made this raise. So I kind of, if Bill has a hand that looks like 5-6 of clubs here, I really like this call. It also represents less than 10% of his stack, so he's able to kind of make this call without risking a big ton of his chips. Anyway, we get a lot of folds here. Tommy folds, Sherry folds, Chris folds, and Tony decides that he's just going to flat call. So we're going 3-way to a flop. So again, what I said about 5-6 of clubs and 9-8 of diamonds, I mean, these are the types of flops that you're sort of dreaming about. So, you know, Inner Tony obviously has got to put the brakes on. I think everybody's going to put the brakes on and let top 2 make his bet. So top 2 makes a very substantial bet here of 900. I actually feel like when our opponent makes this 900 chip bet and it's really quick, I feel like our opponent has exactly aces. But it's very difficult to know that for sure. Like if our opponent has ace king, he can also be making this bet. So you know, it's just really difficult to figure out. I mean, I'm getting such a super hot price here to be calling this 150. So do I want to get involved? And I think based on the fact that Sherry is involved in this hand and has, you know, she's putting more than 10% of her chips in the middle, I just feel like Sherry's holdings are going to be at least a pocket pair that she wants to make sure she sees a safe flop with. So I think I'm just going to fold, and you know, probably a very good fold by us. We'll come back to that hand if anything crazy happens. But anyways, so top 2 makes this bet of 900, which, you know, says aces or even says, you know, 2 overs. It's actually a really hard hand to read when he bets a little bit. He basically bets a little bit more than half pot, but it's essentially half pot. And Bill decides that he's going to call. So I really am putting Bill on a hand like Jack 9 here, or even 8-9. I think 8-9 makes this call a lot. Because I think anything better, like if Bill is flop 2 pair in this spot, I think he's all in. I think you're not making this call with 2 pair because you're already putting your opponent on an overpair, and you also have another player in the hand, and you don't want to invite any draws to continue. So I think if you have already flop 2 pair in this spot, that your opponent here is never just flat calling with 2 pair. So I do put him on a pair and a draw, and we do end up inviting a call in from Inner Tony. So, you know, Bill's got to be saying to himself, oh shit, you know, maybe I should have raised. But at the end of the day, Inner Tony may have a hand like Queen Jack. But he also was the pre-flop min raiser. So when he makes this call as well, maybe he has a hand like King Queen of clubs. I don't know what Inner Tony is just calling in this spot with. it's sort of hard to speculate. But again, this bet right here is inviting all draws. Like if you're in a hand where you really feel like your opponent here is strong and your opponent here hasn't made his hand yet, and you have a super hand like 2 overs and a flush draw, I really, really, really like this call because you're getting such a ridiculous price, 4 to 1, to be making this call. So anyways, we go ahead and we see a complete, basically a banana comes on the turn. And top 2 decides I've had enough. Okay, he's basically saying, I'm gonna bet 4,500 chips. Sorry, whatever. So top 2 bets 4,500, and both of his opponents fold. And I actually, if top 2, first of all, I just highly doubt top 2 is running some sort of bluff. But I think the deuce is the perfect card to be making that overbet with. So, because basically he's pricing out all draws. And if top 2 has the understanding and the commitment to be making a bet without a pair, and he's still able, like if top 2 has ace king in that spot and he's still making that bet, it's just such a level 3 poker play, like such a perfect poker play, knowing that your opponents are more than likely on draws, and that deuce couldn't have possibly helped their draws. So I just really love this bet from top 2, and he's able to get that bet all the way through. And Bill's in the hand thinking maybe he's gonna turn Yahtzee. Maybe he isn't that far behind. But again, I really felt like Bill was in there with a pair and a straight draw, and I actually really don't know what Tony's in there with when he just cold calls the 900 chip bet on the flop. But anyways, there was a hand where Sherry was all in, so Sherry's kind of short stacked at this point. She is probably one of the most dangerous people, for me at least, because I feel like she does have the chip stacks to overshove pretty much any one of our raises. So the blinds are about to go up to 100, 200, right? So if the blinds are going to go up to 100, 200, then the very minimum that you can raise is to 400. So most people are raising in the 3x range or 2.5x range. So if you're going to be raising between 400 and 500 chips pre-flop, and Sherry has exactly 2,500 chips behind, I mean, she just has such a perfect reshoving range. Like, she can be shoving with ace-8 or better. Not that that's really her MO, but she can definitely put a lot of pressure on you for making raises light if you're going to be just trying to pick up these blinds. So I think with our 8,500 chips, we'd like to get a little bit more active, but I just don't think I'm going to want to fold if Sherry's going to move all in position on us. So I think if I do raise, I'm going to raise under the impression that either Sherry or Krista Carlo is going to be moving all in over top of my raise. Although I don't think Krista Carlo is the type of person who's just going to automatically overshove for no reason. He is going to wait for a hand that's at least as good as ace high. When we get pocket sixes in this spot, I feel like we can get ourselves into a shit ton of trouble. So what I'm going to do is call, and if we do end up getting overshoved, at least I can find out if the players in front of me want to call the overshove, and then I can figure out whether or not I want to call. If I do get a shove here from Sherry or a shove here from DeCarlo, I think that'll let me know that I'm probably going to end up calling the 1,100 chips. And this just looks super strong to a lot of people. So it'll be up to Bill whether or not he wants to call. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to super shove here and really force my opponents out of the hand. And if my opponent really wants to call, like, that's completely up to them. But my hand looks super strong when I'm making this bet. So what I'm trying to do is get to a spot where I'm going to be flipping and I have added equity in the pot. Kind of a weird call here from top 2. Not sure how I want to take it. So, I mean, really unbelievable that I'm getting a call here from 10-6. I mean, it's just out of control that, this guy top 2 is calling with 10-6. Like, I just don't know what to say. So anyways, we get called by a shitty hand, and the shitty hand ends up sucking out. So I'm not going to actually get really upset. I guess when top 2 makes this call, I don't necessarily know what he's thinking. I think he's thinking, you know, maybe I'll just get lucky. Like, some people just like to gamble, and there are players who just like to gamble, but again, my play is 100% plus EV, so I'm not necessarily upset about my play. So let's just take a look at the hand as it plays out. Just one more time, for you people who may be questioning my play, if I am putting DeCarlo on exactly what he has, or ace-queen or ace-jack, and I'm expecting him to shove, then basically my plan is going exactly according to the way it's supposed to go. So when top 2 makes this call, he's obviously making a very terrible call, but he's doing so gambling versus Chris DeCarlo. So he's in a gambling mood with the amount of chips that he has. And when Bill ends up calling, I think Bill is calling with, you know, I actually don't know what Bill might be calling with, but, you know, I actually really have no idea what Bill's calling with. You know, do I think that Bill is limping here, kind of assuming the same thing that we're assuming? So, you know, here we are kind of limping, assuming one of these two is going to go in. I'm actually thinking that that Bill actually does the same thing, and, you know, is making this call pre-flop under the impression that one of these two players might go in, and he may have planned ahead of time to be calling this bet. When I make this overshove raise here, I'm not quite sure. Like, obviously top 2 is saying to himself, you know, ah, shit, I'm probably beat. But maybe he thinks his cards are live, which they weren't. I think, you know, against my specific hand, he probably has the worst thing going for him, because all he has left are 3 outs, and he's behind DeCarlo, he's behind myself, and more than likely would have been behind Bill. But again, you can't expect your opponents to just play by the book all the time. So if you are afraid to make this bet, I think the main reason why I'm talking about this bet right now is look at what I'm accomplishing against your average, normal, everyday poker player who is playing with some sort of, I don't know, some sort of sense of, some sort of parameter of a realistic expectation for the way that they should be playing poker. That this play is super, super profitable, because 99 times out of 100, if my opponent doesn't have aces, kings, queens, jacks, tens right here, you know, he's supposed to fold. Bill is supposed to maybe call, like maybe Bill has ace queen, or maybe Bill has pocket nines, you know, or something where it's possible that he can call. But this bet is just so perfect, because I am going to be flipping most of the time with Chris DeCarlo. So instead of getting, you know, instead of being a 50-50, like, I could be going 50-50 with Chris DeCarlo right now, but I'm getting such a sick price to go 50-50. So it's like if I took a coin, right, and I offered you, and I said, I'm going to flip a coin, you get to pick heads or tails, and I'm going to offer you 1, 2, 3, 4 to 1. I'm going to give you 4 to 1 on a coin flip. Would you take it? And the answer would be, yeah, I would absolutely take it. I would love to take it. So, you know, I'm basically asking for a coin flip where I'm getting 4 to 1, and the table more than likely is going to say, sure, you can have a coin flip and get 4 to 1 and not be at risk. So if this hand folds through, like most of the time it's going to fold through, you know, I'm really only in for effectively a 1200 chip bet, and I'm getting 4 to 1 on that bet, and I'm flipping. And as it turns out, I probably would have won the flip. So it's just such a positive EV bet that I have it in my mental Rolodex as a play that I'm not afraid to have, I'm not afraid to do. I also mentioned that small pocket pairs can get you into a lot of trouble. So let's just look at this from the converse, okay? The converse is, let's just replay this. So the converse is, let's say I make the raise here, okay? If I make the raise here, instead of, like, if I raise to, like, you know, 600 or 500 or even 400, and then DeCarlo shoves over top, I just don't think top 2 with a raise and a re-raise in front of him makes this call. So I think pocket pairs can get you in a lot of trouble if you're not willing to raise with them pre-flop, because it's very difficult for you to A, flop a set, and B, get away from your hand if you do see, you know, maybe only 1 over. So if that flop comes like queen 4-5, it's just very difficult for me to fold to just a single bet. But again, you know, I'm not mad at the way I played the hand. I'm not going to be results oriented in this spot. I'm just going to say, you know, hey, look, you know, if top 2 is the type of player that wants to gamble and, you know, maybe has a vendetta and just feels like he wants to stack players, which, you know, there's players out there who just want to see the world burn and just want to just stack you because they have suited cards and they just say, haha, I call. Obviously, if players are going to be doing that against you, then you're going to be winning a ton of chips a lot of the time. So I guess it just doesn't work out for me in this spot, but again, I'm kind of glad that we saw that hand and we were able to talk about this basic concept of overshoving in order to get added value. And I think specifically with my chip stack, like I don't think I make this play if I only have, I think that's something that I should definitely discuss. Like right now I'm overshoving with 8,400 chips, which represents obviously putting Bill all in, so Bill's got to make a huge decision, and it does represent 50% of Top 2's chip stack. Not that he's going to be in too much trouble if he loses and still has 10,000 chips, but I don't think I'm making this bet with, say, 4,600 chips, because I just don't think it's enough to push both of my opponents out on a regular basis. So let's say I do this bet with 40. Let's just do the math on if I'm making this bet with, like, say, a starting stack of like 4,800 chips or 5,000 chips. Well, then my re-raise would be only about 3,800 more to my opponent. So if my re-raise is 3,800 more and my opponent is getting needs to call 3,800 in order to win, like, 1, 2, 3 plus 8,000. So my opponent is getting more than 2 to 1 on a call. And if my opponent ever feels like he is less than a 2 to 1, less than a 2 to 1 dog, like if my opponent feels like he's 35% to win this hand, like say I'm making this bet with I'm trying to think of a hand that would be, 65-35 with my opponent. And I think Ace-Jack to 10-6. Like, if I'm making this bet with Ace-Jack offsuit and he has 10-6 suited, while he's behind, he's only behind like 35%. So for him to be getting almost 3 to 1 to make this call might be mathematically the right call if I have exactly 4,800 chips. So my bet was also designed to get people to consider that the amount of chips that I'm betting mathematically should be pushing out a lot of hands that shouldn't be calling. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I wouldn't ever recommend making this move unless you are up against opponents who you feel kind of understand that concept. This obviously is a super squeezy play, and Top 2 has revealed a little bit about himself by making this call, and so I know that if I do try and make this play in the future, I'm absolutely going to love it, because I feel like Top 2 is going to be making this call against me and feeling like he is going to be winning this hand. So, I can be making this move pretty much all over the place if I feel like I'm going to be getting calls for my opponents with 10 highs. So definitely leave a comment, let me know what you thought of the video. Definitely thank you for watching. It's too bad we couldn't spin it up today, but again, this is about, these videos are about me trying different lines, and I feel like at the very least we're able to accomplish a different line here. And really talk about a concept which some of you, might not feel comfortable trying right away, but definitely I'm glad you guys got a chance to see it, and I was able to explain where my head was at when I'm making this play. Because obviously I don't feel like Pocket Sixes, is the best hand against 3 players. It's really just designed to be up against Chris DiCarlo by himself. But again, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys. I'll see you guys over at Tuna's Place.